Yesterday, the Trump campaign said it was hacked and suggested Iranian actors had stolen documents. Emails obtained from that hack were reportedly sent to Politico and the Washington Post, but both organizations declined to publish them. The claim came a day after Microsoft revealed that Iran and other foreign actors are interfering in the campaign. We go now to CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis and CBS News cybersecurity expert and analyst Chris Krebs. He was also the head of CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, during the Trump administration. So, Olivia, does U.S. intelligence assess that this was indeed Iran?
So far, the U.S. intelligence community hasn't said either way. They have deferred instead to the Justice Department, as has the White House. They haven't weighed in on this alleged hack. Microsoft, likewise, is declining to comment beyond the original report that it already issued this week, which didn't specify which campaign was at issue. Both of them, however, thus far have said things about Iranian activity that lends credence to some of what the campaign has said. The intelligence community, in its last update on election security in late July, indicated that Iran was moving beyond being a chaos agent to actively intervening in order to affect the outcome of the presidential race. And while intelligence officials didn't specify explicitly which campaign Iran was trying to denigrate, officials said that they were opposing the candidate that they believe would exacerbate tensions. So it looks right now like it's a reprisal of what happened in 2020 when U.S. intelligence concluded with high confidence that Iranian-linked actors had worked to undermine Mr. Trump's campaign at the direction of the supreme leader. I think it's worth noting that Microsoft's analysis did link the spear phishing attempt to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which has a direct line to the supreme leader, and also notable that they weren't clear on the intentions. Iranians target senior political officials all of the time for intelligence gathering purposes. Whether that was the purpose here, to gather intelligence or to fuel an election interference campaign, or both, is still a question.
Right. And Chris, you were in office in 2020 when Iran tried to intervene then.
That's right.
How different is this?
Well, that was a much more public effort. So if you recall, in late October, the Iranians sent a bunch of emails out to voters. They were able to collect emails through hacking into voter registration databases, and they threatened them. They posed as the Proud Boys. They said, we're going to come after you if you don't register to vote as a Republican and go and vote for President Trump. Subsequent to that, they released a video. Immediately, the intelligence community was on top of it. There was a public press conference Wednesday evening with the Director of National Intelligence, the Director of the FBI. I was there alongside the Department of Justice. And that was a stark difference from 2016, when it took about 8-9 months to make a public attribution. This was done in the order of 36 hours or something to that effect.
Should we expect that now?
I think based on the intelligence community's rapid declassification in advance of the Russian attack on Ukraine, it seems to be that is the pattern for rapid declassification. So I would not be surprised to see something soon.
We're going to take a break and come back and complete this conversation on the other side of it, so stay with us. We return now to our conversation on cybersecurity with Olivia Gazis and Chris Krebs. Chris, the Trump campaign is calling on reporters not to publish anything they might receive as a result of this alleged criminal behavior. The model I think of is what happened in 2016 when the DNC was hacked and emails ended up hurting Hillary Clinton's campaign. Is that what Iran is replicating now?
It sure seems so. If you go back and you look at the Microsoft statement from Friday that talks about 3 prongs of an Iranian effort right now. One is to go after campaigns. Another is this broader disinformation effort to stoke the fires amongst society. And the third element is they went after a county election official. That is the exact replication of the 2016 Russian playbook that was outlined in the 2017 intelligence community assessment. So what I think we're seeing is the Russification of Iranian information operations. Now, what is different is who is receiving the information and what they do. So what is Politico doing? What is the Washington Post doing? They are showing some discretion right now. I think that is an evolution in a response. What will also be interesting to see is what social media platforms do. They do have a mixed track record of allowing some of this information to get out there. In other cases, they have suppressed or taken it offline. And that is yet to be seen what's going to happen.
A hack and dump. And does this information show up somewhere?
This is a critical point here. This is a hack and leak. This is malinformation. We've been told for over half a decade that hack and leak's not a real thing. Now that, in this case, the shoe's on the other foot, we are finding that, yes, in fact, hack and leak is a real thing. We should expect more of that. Keep in mind, it is August. We have a long way to go in this election. Iran specifically seems to have advanced their efforts, moved them to the left perhaps a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see Russia enter the fray soon. Microsoft talks about Russian disinformation efforts, a group that we track in the labs known as Doppelganger. They are active. Others are going to be out there moving as well as the Chinese.
And Olivia, we know that the Director of National Intelligence has made clear it is Russia, it is also China trying to have some influence here. What are they seeing in terms of preferred candidates? If Iran's trying to hurt Donald Trump, who are the others trying to help or hurt?
Right. There's definitely an interesting dynamic this time around, because as much as the focus today is on Iran, intelligence officials have actually said that Russia continues to pose the preeminent threat in 2024. They are active, they are aggressive, they are increasingly reaching for tools that boost the efficacy and sophistication of the campaigns that they're launching. And as with the case in Iran, intelligence officials aren't explicit about whose campaign they're intervening to undermine or boost, but said that their preferences haven't changed, which in 2016 and 2020, we know that at President Putin's direction, there was a broad campaign led by Russian actors in order to denigrate the Democratic candidates and support Mr. Trump. Yeah. What makes things interesting this year is Iran and Russia being at cross purposes, all while deepening their strategic partnership in Ukraine, right? Exchanging missile and technologies there. But again, they're probably both happy for the byproduct of as much disinformation and discord, sowing as much of that as they can over the course of the election season.
And I know we're going to be talking about this, unfortunately, through the election, as you just said, Chris.
And that is a key point. Chaos is the point.
Right.
Here.
Chaos is the point. And we need to sort out fact from fiction. Thank you both for helping us do that. We want to go now to Kansas Democratic Governor Laura Kelly. Good morning to you, Governor.
Good morning to you.
So, Governor, you are in a pretty unique position here. You are a twice elected Democratic governor of a pretty red state. Democrats have been bleeding support in rural America for years. How did Democrats woo back rural America?
Well, you just have to get out there and listen. And then produce. You know, when you do that, you will see that you know, while we label everybody red or blue, the fact of the matter is here in Kansas, we're Kansans, and so you know, if you are a Democrat but you share the values of most Kansans, you just need to get out there, talk with them, get them to know you, you to know them, and then they'll develop that trust and put it in you to run the state.
Well, Tim Walz is the first sitting governor to join a Democratic presidential ticket since Bill Clinton. He runs a pretty blue state, but there seems to be a bet that he can speak to the heartland, that he can speak to rural America. Do you think that's overstated?
No, not at all. I mean, Tim Walz is the epitome of the Midwestern dad. You know, you could put him at any state fair, on any main street, and certainly in any Friday night football game in rural Kansas, and he would fit right in. I think we also need to remember that while Minnesota is a blue state, he represented in Congress for 12 years a very red section of Minnesota. So he understands rural Minnesota, he understands rural America, and I think that's one of the reasons that he's a huge asset to the Harris-Walz team.
So your state was one of the first to put the issue of abortion on a state ballot, to leave it to the voters to decide, and those voters overwhelmingly rejected restrictions. So Democrats often point to your state as proof of concept, that this is a galvanizing issue across party lines. But I found it interesting in interviews that you've said you try not to talk about abortion. Are Democrats miscalculating by putting it front and center?
No, I don't think so. I think I didn't put it front and center because it wasn't an issue that I could really deal with. It was a ballot issue. Those issues go right around me and onto the ballot and to the people. So I decided that it was better for me to let the people decide what they wanted to do with that, and for me to continue to focus on the other issues where I actually could have an impact, you know, on our infrastructure, on our economic development, on our schools. But we can see in other states where governors have come out very aggressively supporting women's reproductive rights. Michigan, for instance, comes to mind. It has worked. You know, they have moved the needle in Michigan and other states because they have focused on that issue. And whether we want it to be an issue or not, it is. And I think it will be an issue in the presidential race this year, too.
But I read that you said one of the reasons you personally tried not to talk about it was not just procedural, but also because you said Democrats are getting drawn into hot-button culture war issues. And you said you don't want to get dragged into conversations that you don't want to have. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't want to get distracted by issues that take us away from the core issues that a governor is responsible for. And that is just what I said before. You've got to make sure your schools are funded. You've got to make sure your roads are built. You've got to make sure you're building your economy. You've got to make sure you're fixing your child welfare system. We've got all sorts of other things that we need to be focused on. And what I found, particularly during my campaigns, is that my opponents wanted to use cultural, socially divisive issues to distract from the real issues because they didn't have answers for that.
Well, Governor, it'll be interesting to see if you can replicate your success, and we will track what is happening, not just in Kansas, but in some of these other gubernatorial races around the country. We'll be right back. We're joined now by the CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan. Good to have you here.
It's great to be here again, Margaret. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And this is a week where we had a lot of turbulence in the financial markets and some jitters here. We know that both presidential campaigns in the coming days will outline their vision for the economy. So I'm hoping you can kind of level set for us. What is the reality of what you are seeing with American consumers right now?
Well, in our consumer base of 60 million customers spending every week, what you're seeing is they're spending at a rate of growth over this year over last year for July and August so far, about 3%. That is half the rate it was last year at this time. And so the consumers slowed down. They have money in their accounts, but they're depleting a little bit. They're employed, they're earning money. But if you look at it, they've really slowed down. So the Fed is in a position they have to be careful that they don't slow down too much. Right now, where they are spending at is consistent where they spent in 17, 18, 19, a low inflation, more normal growth economy.
I saw in one of your Bank of America reports that, and you just alluded to this, more price sensitivity and that savings accounts are being diminished.
Yeah.
That would suggest people really are not bringing in enough that they have to go into their savings. Like, is this all just inflation that's pressuring?
If you look across different segments of earnings power, those answers are somewhat different. But if you look at it overall, there's been a lot of money moved to instruments that pay higher interest rates out of the checking accounts. They cleaned up because it went from 0% interest to 5% interest. And so if you remove that, basically the people who had an account with us in January 2020 before the pandemic, you look at them now, they're still sitting with much more, even inflation adjusted, much more in their account. The problem is it started drifting down, which indicates that they're using that money now to maintain their lifestyle. That's not that unusual in the summer months, frankly, because of travel and vacations and everything. Right. And where the money is being spent by our consumers is on those types of experiences. But if you look within it, they're still going to restaurants and they're taking travel, but on the other hand, they're spending a little bit they're going to the food store the same number of times, but spending a little bit less, which means they're basically finding bargains and things like that. And you're seeing corporations cut price to respond to that. And so it's the way the economy works, and it's slowing down. And that's where we have to be careful, because we've won the war on inflation. It's come down. It's not where people want it yet, but we got to be careful that we don't try to get so perfect that we actually put us in recession. But our team is a great team at Bank of America Research, does not have any recession predicted anymore. Last year, this time, it was a recession. This year, we talked about now there's no recession. And basically, they say we go to 2% growth to 1.5% growth over the next 6 quarters. It kind of bump along at that growth rate, plus or minus 2%.
And they're betting that in September, the Federal Reserve does go ahead with an interest rate cut.
Yeah, and I think that's the market consensus is actually more cuts than our team is. Ours is 2 this year, September, December, 4 next year, and a couple next year. But I think one of the concepts you hear out there a lot, Margaret, is this concept of higher for longer. The reality is our team, and most people think, will settle with 3.5% Fed funds rate, which is much different than the last 15, 17 years people have lived in. So people came into the business world, in 2007, 2008, have not seen this kind of interest rate environment. And so we're getting back to normal. And that's going to take a while for people to adjust to, both on the corporate side and commercial side and on the consumer side. So
I'm not asking you a political question here. The Federal Reserve is set up by Congress as politically neutral. It has to deal with employment and stabilizing prices. This past week, Donald Trump was asked if, as president, he could manage a soft landing of the economy with the current Federal Reserve leadership in place. Here is how he responded.
I feel the president should have at least say in there. Yeah, I feel that strongly. I think that in my case, I made a lot of money. I was very successful, and I think I have a better instinct than, in many cases, people that would be on the Federal Reserve or the chairman.
The chairman was appointed by Donald Trump, Jerome Powell, and continues to serve. But what he's talking about now is political leaders influencing or overriding economists in setting the Fed funds rate and setting interest rates.
I think
what would be the implication of that?
I think if you look around the world's economies and you see where central banks are independent and operate freely, they tend to fare better than the ones that don't. And so I think that that's kind of the American way. It's been that way. Does that stop people from giving the Chair Powell advice or other people? No, I give them advice. So we all give them advice. And so I think we got to be careful. When he goes up and does the Humphrey Hawkins, he gets lots of advice about where rates should go. So there's a lot of people have a view of it, but their job is to sort through it all and say what's best for the U.S. economy on those 2 dimensions you talked about and be consistent. I think right now, Brian Moynihan giving advice is they got to be more careful to the downside of not starting to move down rates to restore a feeling that there's light at the end of the tunnel. They've told people rates probably aren't going to go up, but if they don't start taking them down relatively soon, you could dispirit the American consumer. Once the American consumer really starts going very negative, then it's hard to get them back. And on the commercial side, the higher rate environment is slowing down commercial progress. So corporations aren't using their lines of credit, middle market, small businesses. They've gone backwards in the use of lines of credit. So why don't they use a line of credit? Either there is an opportunity or the cost is high or both. And right now, that's a little bit they're worried about the future. So I think right now it's time for them to start to become a little more accommodative and take off the restrictions and let the thing go. So I'm giving them advice. Everybody does. And I think a strong central bank has to take all that advice and process it.
It's not unusual during a political campaign to hear some of the populist ideas. But one thing I've heard from Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan, I've heard from you at Bank of America, is this concern of when you send checks to people, as we discussed with J.D. Vance, when you talk about not taxing tips, as now both campaigns are doing, that there is still that hard question of how does America deal with the debts and deficit it already has? Right. Those conversations just aren't happening. What is that cost?
Well, I think right now the cost is not that high. I mean, there's a mathematical cost to it. As interest rates go up, the debt carry cost goes up for the federal government, just like it goes up for the consumer or companies. And so that's a hurt to the economy because that money could have been used for something else had they not borrowed so much. The second question is, was there more stimulus applied to the COVID issues than needed? And the answer is yes, by most economists, multiples. And so that we got to let that work its way out of the system. That's what helped inflation. And it happened on both administrations' watch. But the third question really is this question of handling the debt. And at the end of the day, 15 years or so ago, the Bowles-Simpson Commission came out with ways to do it. There was the idea we'll raise taxes. The response to the business community is, if you're going to raise taxes, for what? If you're going to do it to pay down debt, individuals and companies would probably say, I got that. We've had to wage a war on COVID. We won the war. Now we've got to move it. But we can't just raise taxes and stuff that doesn't really provide for productivity or, frankly, help manage the debt. And that's a concern people have. That'll be a political food fight of high order here for the next few months. And we will definitely be talking about that as we go into 2025 and the expiration of some of those tax policies. Brian Moynihan, it's great to have you here. It's always good to be here, Margaret. Thank you. We'll be back in a moment. Tensions are high in the Middle East, where fears of an expanding regional war are growing. A week after Israel killed a top Hamas leader in Iran and 2 Hezbollah commanders. For more, we go to retired General Frank McKenzie, who was the former commander of U.S. forces in the Middle East. Good to have you back.
Good to be here, Margaret.
General, we've talked a number of times in recent months, and the scenario you have flagged as the most concerning is one it seems we are on the brink of, and that is Lebanese Hezbollah entering this conflict potentially in a significant way. How do you characterize where we are right now?
Margaret, I think we are hours, maybe days, not weeks away from Lebanese Hezbollah entering this fight. And that's always been the big variable. They are the largest non-state military entity in the world, a parasite on Lebanon, but they have tens and tens of thousands of highly accurate rockets and missiles, and they can challenge Israel in a way that Iran, and the Houthis for that matter, are unable to do so because of their geographic proximity, because of the number of weapons that they have. And that's very concerning. I've thought all along the most dangerous turn in events would be if they chose to enter at scale. Now, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Lebanese Hezbollah, has got to make a very strategic decision on this, because he will be open to a withering Israeli counterattack should he choose to enter at great scale. And what would great scale be? Don't know. I would say if he chooses to attack Israeli population centers. I would say if significant casualties are caused by a Hezbollah attack, that will bring the IDF back in with great force. And he recognizes that. And the last point I just make is Hassan Nasrallah and Lebanese Hezbollah are perhaps weaker in Lebanon now than they've been in many years because of the destruction of the economy, the fact that the country's in governmental gridlock, lots of problems in Lebanon that he has to think about before he chooses to fight Israel toe-to-toe.
And that certainly is something the diplomats who are trying to cool things off are very aware of. Your successor, CENTCOM Commander General Kurilla, was twice in Israel this past week. We know the United States has sent F-22 jets to the region. What do you expect the scope of U.S. involvement to be?
I think we saw a taste of that last April in Iran's 13 April attack on Israel, which was not a successful attack. And it was not successful for several reasons, one of which was Israeli competence. The second was U.S. assistance and some assistance from other nations in the region. All of those things militated to blunt and really turn aside the Iranian attack. I think that General Kurilla will probably strive to reproduce those same capabilities, that same approach this time. It will be a significantly harder task, though, again, if Lebanese Hezbollah chooses to enter, because now you face a multi-axis attack. Iran from the east, Lebanese Hezbollah from the north. I'm sure Hamas will chime in to the limits of their ability, and the Houthis will come in. So it will be a significant test for Israel. We are committed to their defense. I think that Central Command has done a great job of assisting them as they prepare for this attack, which I believe is imminent. Is imminent.
You would expect to see U.S. jets in the air there intercepting as they did last time?
I think we would see the same model that was used last time. Now, here's the thing. The Iranians and Lebanese Hezbollah have had the opportunity to study that template. I'm sure they'll try to make some adjustments that will make it more difficult. On the other hand, we too are an adaptive learning organization, so we'll be looking at our tactics. And we've got very good commanders who can fight an air battle, and it will be an air battle that's going to be fought. And I think we can be very successful here.
Do you think the U.S. strategy of trying to focus in on August 15th and a ceasefire in Gaza should still be the centerpiece for lowering tensions throughout the region?
certainly we should try to get to some post-conflict state in Gaza. That's an objective that needs to be there regardless of whatever else is going on in the region. I'm not certain, though, that the current Iranian efforts against Israel are directly related to what's going on in Gaza. The Iranians, fundamental to Iranian philosophy of life is destruction of the state of Israel. We should take them at their word on this. They're not actually going to attack or come into conflict with Israel because of what's going on in Gaza. Their reasons are the existence of Israel itself, and those transcend anything going on in Gaza.
Sir, before I let you go, August 15th is the anniversary of the Taliban seizing control of Afghanistan a few years ago. I wonder what you think about U.S. security currently.
Well, I think about it a lot, Margaret. And 3 years on, our ability to see inside Afghanistan is quite limited. The violent extremist organizations characterized by ISIS-K and other groups, we believe they're actually expanding. They carried out a successful attack in Russia a few months ago. I am concerned about the growth of those organizations, and I'm concerned about the relative lack of our ability to see what they're doing and act against them should it prove necessary to do so. So I think we're in a weaker state now than we were a year ago or 2 years ago, and I'm concerned about the future.
General, always good to talk to you. And we'll all be on edge, as you said, for the coming days. Thank you. And thanks to all of you out there for watching us. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.